in the quiet of a city apartment at night, holding her sleeping baby. Her expression is a complex mixture of emptiness and sorrow as she looks out the window, at the city lights. The victory feeling hollow. 35mm lens. f1.8. Soft natural light. Shallow depth of field. Cinematic color. Hyperrealistic. Hyperdetailed. 4K resolution. Prompt 17. Authentic photo of an American woman. 32 years old. With features like long wavy brown hair, fair skin with a few freckles, expressive hazel eyes. She sits on the floor of the apartment, a sketchbook open in her lap. A small, hopeful smile touches her lips as she draws the first lines of a new, smaller house. A baby cooing in a bassinet beside her. 35mm lens. f1.8. Soft natural light. Shallow depth of field. Cinematic color. Hyperrealistic. Hyperdetailed. 4K resolution. Prompt 18. A documentary-style shot of a windswept bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Authentic photo of an American woman. 32 years old. With features like long wavy brown hair, fair skin with a few freckles, expressive hazel eyes. She is dressed in practical work clothes, her hair tied back, studying a set of blueprints against the backdrop of a house under construction. Her expression is one of focused, peaceful determination. 35mm lens. f1.8. Soft natural light. Shallow depth of field. Cinematic color. Hyperrealistic. Hyperdetailed. 4K resolution. Prompt 19. An interior shot of a small, light-filled coastal home. The style is warm, modern, and humble. Authentic photo of an American woman. 32 years old. With features like long wavy brown hair, fair skin with a few freckles, expressive hazel eyes. She is kneeling on the floor, her face full of gentle love and encouragement as she watches her toddler daughter take her first wobbly steps. 35mm lens. f1.8. Soft natural light. Shallow depth of field. Cinematic color. Hyperrealistic. Hyperdetailed. 4K resolution. Prompt 20. A final, hopeful shot from outside the new coastal home, looking in through a large picture window at sunset. Authentic photo of an American woman. 32 years old. With features like long wavy brown hair, fair skin with a few freckles, expressive hazel eyes. She is silhouetted against the warm interior light, holding her daughter in her arms and looking out at the ocean. Her posture is one of strength, peace, and quiet triumph. 35mm lens. f1.8. Soft natural light. Shallow depth of field. Cinematic color. Hyperrealistic. Hyperdetailed. 4K resolution. The air in this room is thick with the smell of mildew and regret. It's a cheap motel on the forgotten edge of town. The kind of place where hope comes to die. A single fluorescent light buzzes overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the stained carpet and peeling wallpaper. In my arms, my daughter, Arya, sleeps. She is only 3 weeks old. A tiny, perfect being completely unaware of the wreckage of our lives. She is the only clean thing in this place. My eyes are fixed on the door. Taped to the splintered wood is an eviction notice. The red letters of the word final seem to scream at me. A constant reminder of how far I've fallen. Just a few weeks ago, I was sleeping on high thread count sheets in a master bedroom with a view of the Oregon pines. I was a wife. I was a homeowner. I was safe. Now, I am nothing but a statistic. Another single mother on the verge of homelessness. Arya stirs in her sleep, her tiny mouth making soft sucking motions. I pull her closer, breathing in the sweet, milky scent of her hair. My heart aches with a love so fierce it feels like it could shatter my ribs. And that love is tangled with a cold, hard rage. A rage that has become the only thing keeping me warm at night. He promised me forever. He built me a house of dreams, only to sell it to her while I was bringing his daughter into the world. He didn't just take my home. He took my future. He took my dignity. And for that, I will take everything from him. 9 months. It's the time it takes to create a life. It's also the time it takes to completely dismantle one. 9 months ago, I wasn't in a place like this. I was home. The scent wasn't mildew. It was the clean, crisp smell of fresh paint and sawdust. The perfume of new beginnings. I stood in the center of the nursery, a hand resting on the swell of my belly, and smiled. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling window, the one I had specifically designed to catch the morning rays. It painted golden stripes across the pale yellow walls and danced over the white crib we had assembled together just last weekend. Everything was perfect. Almost. I ran my hand over the smooth, cool wood of the crib. It was my house. Not just the place I lived, but my house. I had designed every inch of it. As an interior architect, it was my masterpiece. The culmination of years of dreaming and sketching. I'd poured my soul into the open concept living space, the reclaimed timber beams, the kitchen island that was big enough for a lifetime of family breakfasts. It was more than just wood and glass. It was a structure built from love and hope, a fortress for the family we were about to start. Talking to her again, I turned, a wide smile spreading across my face. Mark stood in the doorway, leaning against a frame with that easy charm that had captivated me from our very first date. He was handsome in that classic, all-American way, strong jaw, warm blue eyes, and a smile that could sell sand in a desert. Which, as a top real estate broker in Northwood, he practically did. I was just telling her that her room is ready, I said, patting my stomach. Now all we need is her. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his hands joining mine on my belly. He nuzzled my neck, his stubble tickling my skin. She'll be here before we know it, he whispered, his voice a low, comforting rumble. And she's going to love the home her brilliant mother built for her. I leaned back into his embrace, my heart swelling with a happiness so profound it felt tangible. This was all I had ever wanted. A loving husband, a child on the way, a home we had made our own. Mark had always been my biggest supporter, encouraging me to quit my job at a large firm to start my own freelance business. He celebrated my successes as if they were his own and held me through my moments of doubt. He was, in every way, the perfect husband. How was your day? I asked, turning in his arms to face him. Did you close the deal on the Henderson property? Of course, he said, giving me a quick, confident kiss. They couldn't resist my charm. He winked. But more importantly, I brought you something. He reached into the pocket of his tailored jacket and pulled out a small, foil-wrapped chocolate. Your favorite. Dark chocolate with sea salt. I moaned with delight as I unwrapped it. You're the best. Only for my 2 girls, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He was always doing little things like that, remembering my favorite snacks, leaving sweet notes on the bathroom mirror, filling my car with gas so I wouldn't have to. It was a constant stream of affection that left no room for doubt. I was the luckiest woman in the world. Later that evening, I was propped up on the couch, sketching ideas for a client's kitchen remodel, when Mark's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He was in the kitchen getting me a glass of water. The screen lit up with a name, Sophia Rinaldi. I recognized the name. She was a colleague of his, a newer agent at his firm who he said was a real shark. Incredibly ambitious. He walked back into the room, saw the phone, and his smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He picked it up and walked out onto the deck, sliding the glass door shut behind him. It was a habit he developed over the last few months, taking work calls outside for privacy. I hadn't thought much of it. His job was stressful and involved confidential financial information. It made sense. But through the glass, I could see his posture change. The relaxed, easygoing man who had just fed me chocolate was gone. He was pacing, one hand gesturing sharply as he spoke. His brow furrowed. His voice was too low to hear, but the intensity of his conversation was clear even from a distance. I'll slip. She's a little high-strung, panicking about a last-minute issue with an appraisal. Everything okay? I asked. Nothing for you to worry about, he said, kissing my forehead. I handled it. That's what I do. I fix things. Now, put that laptop away. You're supposed to be relaxing. He gently took the computer. Of course, he had stressful calls. I shouldn't doubt him. He loved me. He was building this life for us. The next day, I met my best friend, Chloe, for our weekly coffee date. Chloe and I had been inseparable since college. She was a razor-sharp divorce addict, cynical, and fiercely loyal. You're glowing, she said as I sat down. carefully maneuvering my belly around the small table. Either that or the pregnancy hormones have finally turned you into a radioactive goddess. I laughed. It's the glow of someone who finally finished painting a nursery. I swear. If I see another shade of pale yellow, I'm going to scream. Well, it looks amazing, she said. I saw the pictures you posted. You're so damn talented. That house is a work of art. Thanks, I said, my chest puffing with pride. It's my baby. Well, my first baby. We ordered our drinks, a decaf latte for me, a black Americano for her, and chatted about her latest infuriating case, and my latest weird pregnancy craving. So how's Mr. Perfect? Chloe asked, stirring her coffee with more force than necessary. She'd always been a little wary of Mark, not in an overt way, but she held a small piece of herself back from his charm. She called him Mr. Perfect with a hint of sarcasm I always chose to ignore. He's wonderful, I said honestly. He's been so supportive. You should have seen him trying to assemble the crib. It was like watching a man try to wrestle an octopus. Chloe smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. That's great. I'm happy for you. It's just, he seems so polished. Almost polished. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, my tone a little defensive. She held up her hands in surrender. Nothing. Ignore me. I spend my days sifting through the wreckage of broken promises and secret credit cards. It's made me suspicious of everyone. He's a great guy, and he clearly adores you. But the seed was planted. A tiny, nagging thought. To polished. What did that even mean? I pushed it away. Chloe didn't see him when he was relaxed at home, when he'd whisper his dreams to me in the dark or get emotional watching a sappy commercial. She only saw the public-facing Mark Vance, the successful real estate magnate. She didn't know him like I did. A week later, the red flags began to wave a little more vigorously, but my love for him was a thick fog, obscuring my view. Hey, babe, he said, walking into my office while I was on a video call with a client. He mouthed, sorry, and scribbled a note on a pad of paper, holding it up for me to see. Have to fly to Seattle for the weekend. Big commercial client. Last minute. Love you? I gave him a questioning look. He just shrugged with an apologetic smile, blew me a kiss, and walked out. When my call was finished, I went to find him. He was already packing an overnight bag. Seattle? This weekend? I asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. But we were going to take that birthing class on Saturday. I know. Honey, I'm so sorry, he said, coming over to hug me. This is huge. If I land this client, it'll set us up for years. We'll be able to afford the best of everything for the baby. You won't have to work at all unless you want to. He framed my face with his hands, his expression sincere. This is for us. For our family. How could I argue with that? He was working hard to provide for us. It was selfish of me to be upset about a missed class. Okay, I said, forcing a smile. Just be safe. Always, he said, kissing me deeply. I'll call you the second I land. And I'll be back before you know it. Probably with some ridiculously expensive gift to make up for it. He left, and the house suddenly felt too big. Too quiet. I walked through the rooms, my hand trailing along the walls I had designed. I ended up in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair, my hands on my belly. The baby kicked. A strong, reassuring thump against my palm. I smiled. It was okay. Mark was doing this for us. We were a team. I was just being hormonal and overly sensitive. I spent the weekend nesting, organizing baby clothes by size and color, and putting the final touches on the mural of gentle, rolling hills I had painted on the nursery wall. I talked to Mark each night. He sounded tired but excited, telling me about his meetings, describing the view from his hotel room. It all sounded perfectly normal, perfectly plausible. Looking back, I see it so clearly now. The separate conversations, the vague excuses, the way he used our future as a shield to hide his present. He was building one life with me, a life of nurseries and promises, while simultaneously laying the groundwork for another. He wasn't just selling houses, he was selling a fantasy. And I was his most devoted, most unsuspecting client. I was so focused on the beautiful home he was promising me that I never thought to check the foundations. And they were rotten to the core. The first contraction hit me like a lightning strike. It wasn't the gentle tightening I'd read about in the pregnancy books. It was a fierce, primal clench deep in my belly that stole my breath and made my vision swim. I gripped the kitchen counter, my knuckles turning white. I was only 37 weeks along. It was too soon. Another wave seized me. Stronger this time. A warm gush of fluid ran down my legs, soaking my sweatpants. There was no mistaking it. This was real. This was happening now. My first instinct, my only instinct, was Mark. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I found his name and pressed call, my heart hammering against my ribs. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Ellie, is everything okay?" He answered, his voice strained and distant, the sound of traffic in the background. "It's time," I gasped, leaning my forehead against the cool cabinet door. "Mark, the baby's coming." My water broke. There was a pause on the other end, a beat of silence that stretched for an eternity. For a crazy second, I thought the call had dropped. Then he spoke, his voice tight with something I couldn't identify. "Now, are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure," I cried, a fresh wave of pain making me double over. "The contractions are already close. You need to come home. We need to go to the hospital." Okay, just breathe. "Honey," he said, but he sounded distracted. I could hear him talking to someone else. His voice muffled. "Listen, I'm in the middle of something. Something huge. Bigger than your child being born?" I asked, a sliver of disbelief cutting through the pain. "No, of course not. Don't be like that," he said, his tone placating, condescending. "This is the deal I told you about. The one that will set us up for life. I'm literally minutes away from closing it. This is for us, Ellie. For the baby. I just need a little more time. Can you call Chloe? Can she take you to the hospital? I'll meet you there. I promise. I will be there as soon as I possibly can." His words were a blur. The deal. For us. I promise. The same excuses he always used. But this was different. This wasn't a misbirthing class. I was alone. Scared. And in pain. And my husband was choosing a business deal over me. Over our daughter. "Mark," I started. But the line was already dead. He had hung up. Tears of pain and frustration streamed down my face. I slid to the floor, my body trembling. He wasn't coming. Not yet. Anyway, I was on my own. My hand found my phone again, and with trembling fingers, I dialed Chloe. She answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice instantly alert. She always knew when something was wrong. "The baby." I sobbed. "It's coming. And Mark, he's in a meeting." "That son of a bitch," she hissed, without a moment's hesitation. "I'm on my way. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Do you have your hospital bag by the door?" "Yes," I whispered. "Good. Unlock the front door and try to breathe. I'll handle everything. You're not alone." Her voice was a lifeline in a swirling ocean of panic. I did as she said, crawling to the door and fumbling with the deadbolt. Then I just lay on the cool tile of the entryway, timing the relentless waves of contractions and waiting for the sound of her car. The next several hours were a painful, disorienting haze. Chloe was a rock, a fierce protector. She got me to the hospital, handled the check-in nurses, and held my hand through every agonizing contraction. Her calm presence a stark contrast to my husband's absence. I tried calling Mark a few more times from the delivery room, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Each unanswered call felt like a small betrayal, a fresh crack in the foundation of our perfect life. The labor was long and difficult. The doctors and nurses came and went, their faces a mix of professional concern and pity. They all asked the same question. "Is your husband on his way?" And each time, Chloe would answer for me. Her voice clipped and cold. "He's been delayed." After 18 hours of excruciating effort, with Chloe whispering encouragement in my ear and my own screams echoing in the sterile room, my daughter was born. They placed her on my chest, a tiny, willing creature with a full head of dark hair and her father's blue eyes. And in that moment, everything else melted away. The pain, the fear, the anger at Mark, it all vanished, replaced by a love so pure and overwhelming it brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Hello, Arya," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I'm your mom." It was nearly 2 hours later when Mark finally appeared. He burst into the room, his hair disheveled and his suit wrinkled. He was carrying a ridiculously large bouquet of roses, a teddy bear, and a triumphant smile. I'm here, he announced, his voice booming in the quiet room. I'm so sorry. Honey, the deal was a nightmare. But we did it. We closed. We're set for life. He rushed to my bedside, his eyes falling on the small bundle in my arms. His face softened instantly. Oh, my God. Is that her? I was too exhausted to be angry anymore. All I could do was nod. He leaned down and kissed my forehead, then gently touched Arya's cheek with his finger. She's perfect. He breathed, his eyes welling with tears. She's absolutely perfect. Just like her mom. He looked the part. The doting father. Overwhelmed with emotion. He could over Arya. Took a dozen pictures. And held her with a practiced ease that surprised me. He apologized again and again for missing the birth, spinning a story about locked door negotiations and last-minute snags. And I, weak from labor and high on the euphoria of new motherhood, chose to believe him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted the perfect family I had dreamed of. And here he was, completing the picture. The next 2 days in the hospital were a blur of feeding, changing, and learning how to be a mother. Mark was a constant presence, attentive and helpful. He changed diapers. He fielded calls from our family and friends. He made sure I had everything I needed. The anger I had felt was buried under a wave of relief. We were a family. Everything was going to be okay. On the 3rd day, we were discharged. The nurse wheeled me out to the curb. Arya nestled securely in her new car seat. The sun was shining, and the air felt fresh and full of promise. As Mark carefully drove us away from the hospital, I looked down at my daughter sleeping peacefully and felt a profound sense of peace. We were going home. To our home. The beautiful house I had built. The safe haven where our lives would truly begin. I can't wait to show her the nursery, I murmured, and my head resting against a cool glass of the window. She's going to love it, Mark said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Our little girl. In our perfect home. Everything is exactly as it should be? He seemed a little on edge. A little jumpy. But I attributed it to the nerves of a new father. He was probably just as overwhelmed as I was. When we pulled into our driveway, I saw a sleek, black sedan I didn't recognize parked by the curb. Is someone here? I asked. Mark glanced at it and then quickly looked away. Must be a neighbor's guest, he said, his voice a little too casual. Come on. Let's get you two inside. He helped me out of the car and unbuckled Arya's seat, lifting it out with care. I walked ahead of him, fumbling in my purse for my keys, my body aching but my heart soaring with anticipation. I couldn't wait to cross the threshold, to leave the hospital behind and step into our future. I reached the front door, a beautiful solid oak door I had picked out myself, and slid my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned, jiggling it. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. That's weird, I said, trying again. The key isn't working. Here. Let me try, Mark said, shifting the car seat to his other arm. But he made no move to take the keys. He just stood there, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. Before he could say another word, the door swung open. A woman stood in the doorway. It was Sophia Rinaldi. She wasn't wearing a business suit. She was dressed in yoga pants and a soft-looking sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked comfortable, at home. She had a mug in her hand, and she took a slow sip from it as her eyes skinned over me, taking in my hospital-issued sweatpants and the exhausted look on my face. Her gaze lingered for a moment on the sleeping baby in Mark's arms. I was utterly confused. Sophia? What are you doing here? I asked, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. Did Mark ask you to drop something off? She didn't smile. Her expression was a cool, unbothered mask. She looked from me to Mark, a silent communication passing between them that I couldn't decipher. Then her eyes settled back on me, cold and dismissive. Can I help you? She asked, her voice as smooth and hard as polished marble. The question was so bizarre, so out of place, that I couldn't process it. What? No. This is my house. I live here, I stammered, looking to Mark for an explanation. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the ground. His jaw clenched. A cold dread, colder than any winter wind, began to creep up my spine. Sophia raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. A small, cruel smile played on her lips as she leaned against the doorframe, making it clear she had no intention of moving. Not anymore, she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. This is my house now. The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering like shards of glass. This is my house now. My mind refused to accept them, to piece them together into any kind of coherent meaning. It felt like a line from a movie, a badly written joke. I stared at Sophia, at the smug curl of her lips, and then my gaze flickered to Mark. He was the key. He would clear this up. He would laugh and tell Sophia to stop messing around, and then he would usher me inside. Mark, I said, my voice a small, trembling thing. What is she talking about? He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my blood run cold. It wasn't confusion or anger. It was pity and guilt. A deep, bottomless well of guilt. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just shook his head slightly. A pathetic, defeated gesture. In that moment, I knew. I didn't know the how or the why, but I knew. This wasn't a joke. Get out of my doorway, I said to Sophia, my voice suddenly low and dangerous. A surge of adrenaline, a primal protective instinct for the child in my husband's arms and the home at my back, momentarily eclipsed my postpartum exhaustion. I took a step forward, intending to push past her. Sophia didn't flinch. She simply held up a hand. I wouldn't do that, she said calmly. You're trespassing. Trespassing, I shrieked, the sound tearing from my throat. I designed this house. I picked out the flooring and the paint colors and the goddamn doorknobs. This is my home. It was your home, she corrected, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. Now it's mine. Ask your husband. He has the paperwork. My head whipped back to Mark. He was still standing there, holding our daughter, a statue of cowardice. The baby, Arya, sensing the tension, began to fuss, her little face crumpling as she let out a thin, reedy cry. Mark, for the love of God, say something, I pleaded, my voice cracking. Ellie, please, he finally mumbled, his voice thick. Let's not do this here. Let's go somewhere and talk. Go somewhere? Go where? I cried, gesturing wildly at the house. This is here. This is our life. What have you done? Sophia let out an impatient sigh. Look, I'm sure this is all very dramatic for you, but I'd like to get back to my coffee. Mark, you know where to send her things. The legal transfer is complete. The property is mine. She looked me up and down one last time, a flicker of triumph in her eyes, before she stepped back and closed a solid oak door in my face. The click of the deadbolt echoed in the sudden, ringing silence. I stood there, staring at the wood grain I knew so well, my mind a complete and utter blank. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted on its axis, the edges of my vision blurring. My legs, weak and trembling from childbirth, finally gave out. I crumpled onto the welcome mat, the one that read Home Sweet Home, and a ragged sob tore through me. Mark finally moved, placing the car seat gently on the porch swing before rushing to my side. Ellie, I can explain, he said, trying to help me up. I slapped his hands away, the touch of his skin feeling like a burn. Don't touch me, I spat, the words tasting like poison. Don't you ever touch me again. I don't know how I managed to get up. I don't know how I found my phone. All I knew was that I needed Chloe. I dialed her number, and when she answered, all I could get out was a single, choked word. Chloe. She understood immediately. Where are you? My house. I sobbed. I don't. Stay right there, she commanded. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming to get you. The next 20 minutes were a silent tableau of misery. I sat on the cold concrete steps of my porch, my arms wrapped around myself, while Mark paced on the lawn, occasionally stopping to try and speak to me. I ignored him, my eyes fixed on a crack in the pavement. He was a stranger to me now, a monster wearing the face of the man I loved. He had brought our brand new daughter home from the hospital, only to have the door slammed in her face. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. When Chloe's car screeched to a halt at the curb, she jumped out before the engine was even off. She took in the scene, broken on the steps. Mark, the guilty husband pacing nearby. The baby, still in her car seat on the porch swing, and her face hardened into a mask of cold fury. She walked straight past Mark as if he didn't exist. She crouched in front of me, her hands gentle on my shoulders. Elle, let's go. We're getting you and the baby out of here. She helped me to my feet and guided my trembling body to her car. Then she marched back to the porch, her movements sharp and efficient. She glared at Mark. Give me the baby, she ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. He meekly handed over the car seat. Chloe buckled Arya into the back seat of her car with a tenderness that was in stark contrast to the anger radiating from her. She got into the driver's seat and turned to me. "We'll figure this out," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I promise." As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back through the rear window. I saw Mark standing alone on the sidewalk in front of the masterpiece I had created. A monument to a life that had just been stolen from me. The lights inside flickered on, casting a warm, inviting glow. Someone else was living my life. Someone else was in my home. Chloe's apartment was on the third floor of a walk-up in the city center. It was small and cozy, cluttered with stacks of legal books and files. But it was clean and safe. It was the complete antithesis of my spacious, minimalist house. She set me up on her pull-out sofa, which she'd made up of fresh linens, and placed Arya's car seat on the coffee table. "I am going to make you some tea," she said. "And then I am going to call a few people. You just sit there and breathe. Your only job right now is you and her." She pointed a finger at the sleeping baby. The days that followed were a gray, featureless fog of despair. My body was a battlefield of postpartum recovery. I was sore. I was bleeding. I was exhausted. My breasts were either painfully engorged or leaking through my shirt. And my heart was shattered into a million pieces. I went through the motions of caring for Arya. I fed her. I changed her. I held her. Her small, warm weight against my chest was the only thing that felt real. The only thing that tethered me to the world. But in the quiet moments in between, when she was sleeping, I would just sit on the edge of the sofa and stare at the wall. My mind replaying that scene at the front door over and over again. The smug look on Sophia's face. The guilt in Mark's eyes. The final, deafening click of the lock. Mark tried to call. Dozens of times. He sent a barrage of text messages filled with pathetic excuses and pleas to talk. "I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like. I did this for us. Please, Ellie. I love you." I deleted them all without responding. Chloe offered to file a restraining order, but I didn't have the energy to even consider it. The man I had married was gone. This new person was a stranger, and I wanted nothing from him. While I drifted in a sea of grief, Chloe went to war. She spent her days on the phone, her voice low and sharp, filled with legal jargon I didn't understand. She met with colleagues, pulled property records, and dug into Mark's finances. Every evening, she would come home with a grim look on her face, and I knew the news wasn't good. Finally, about a week after our world had imploded, she sat down across from me. Arya was asleep in a borrowed bassinet in the corner. Chloe's face was pale, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of rage and sorrow. "I have the full picture now, Elle," she said softly. "And it's bad." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "He didn't just sell the house," she began, her voice steady. "He's been planning this for months. He liquidated shared stocks, moved money out of our joint savings account into a private one. He's essentially stripped you of every asset we could have fought for." I flinched. But the financial blow was nothing compared to the emotional one I had already suffered. "But the house? How could he sell it without my signature? My name is on the deed." Chloe took a deep breath. This was the part she had been dreading. "Do you remember? About 3 months ago, when you were signing a big stack of papers for the mortgage refinance? He told you he'd found a way to get a much lower interest rate." I vaguely remembered it. I had been in the middle of a huge project, working late every night. Mark had come into my office with a thick folder, all smiles and reassurances. He pointed to a few pages. "Sign here and here. Babe. Just standard stuff. It'll save us thousands a year." I trusted him. Of course. I trusted him. I would have signed anything he put in front of me. Chloe's eyes were full of pain for me. "One of the documents he had you sign wasn't for the refinance. It was a power of attorney. A specific, durable POA that gave him the sole right to act on your behalf in all real estate and financial transactions related to the property." He buried it in the middle of the stack. "It's notarized. It's legal. It's ironclad." The air left my lungs. A power of attorney. The trust I had given him, weaponized against me. The pen in my hand had been the instrument of my own destruction. "He used that document to sign for you," Chloe continued, her voice barely a whisper. "He sold the house to Sophia for $1. $1? I asked, my voice numb. "It's a legal maneuver. He effectively gifted it to her to avoid certain taxes and to make it look clean on paper. The money, the real money from your joint accounts, Was likely their slush fund to finance this whole thing. Legally. He had the right to do it. The document you signed gave him that right. He played you from the very beginning. The sale is completely, devastatingly legal. There it was. The harsh, ugly, inescapable truth. I hadn't just been betrayed by my husband. I had been conned. Our entire life together. The loving notes. The supportive words. The shared dreams, it was all along. Elaborate performance. He wasn't just an adulterer. He was a thief. He hadn't just stolen my house. He had stolen my life, my future. And he had used my own hand to do it. A chilling thought snaked its way into my mind. The timing. The closing of the deal. He had waited until I was at my most vulnerable. In the throes of labor. To finalize his betrayal. He had made sure I was trapped, helpless, and distracted by the birth of our child while he signed away our home. I looked down at my hands. The hands that had designed that house. That had held my husband. That had brought my daughter into the world. They were shaking. I wasn't just a victim. I was an accomplice in my own ruin. And the weight of that knowledge, the sheer, calculated cruelty of it all, was a darkness so complete. I thought it might swallow me whole. For a long time. The darkness was all I knew. Grief wasn't a visitor. It was the house I lived in now. It was the air I breathed. The food I couldn't taste. The silence that screamed in my ears when Arya was asleep. I would sit on Chloe's sofa for hours, a warm bottle in my hand growing cold. My mind a static-filled television screen, unable to tune into any clear thought. The ambitious architect, the happy wife, the expectant mother, that woman was dead. She had died on the porch of her own home. In her place was a ghost, a hollowed-out shell going through the mechanical motions of survival. Chloe tried her best. She would come home with my favorite takeout, put on movies she knew I loved, and talk to me about anything other than Mark. She never pushed. She just created a small, safe space for me to shatter in. And she was always there to help sweep out the pieces. About a month into my new, colorless life, a moving company delivered a few dozen boxes to Chloe's building. My things. Or what was left of them. Mark had apparently paid them to pack up my office, my closet, and a few sentimental items, and send them to me. It was another act of calculated cruelty disguised as a courtesy. A final, dismissive severing of our life. He didn't even have the courage to do it himself. The boxes sat stacked against Chloe's living room wall for days. A cardboard mountain of a life I no longer recognized. They felt radioactive. I couldn't bring myself to touch them. You don't have to go through those if you don't want to, Chloe said one evening, seeing my eyes fixed on the stack. We can put them in storage. No, I said, my voice raspy from disuse. I should. There might be baby things. Things Arya needs. It was an excuse, but it was the only one that could get me to move. So I started. One box at a time. It was an exercise in torture. Each object was a landmine of memory. My favorite sweater. The one Mark always said made my eyes look brighter. A collection of architectural magazines with pages I had dog-eared to show him. A framed photo of us on our honeymoon. Our faces bright with a future that turned out to be a lie. With each item, I felt a fresh stab of pain. I sorted things into 2 piles, keep and discard. The discard pile grew much faster. I was purging him. Purging the life we had. Trying to erase the evidence of my own foolishness. Most of the boxes were mine. But one, shoved in the back, was different. It was an old shoebox, dusty and taped shut. With Mark, memories scrawled on the side in his familiar handwriting. My first instinct was to throw the entire box into the discard pile. To burn it without a second thought. But something stopped me. A morbid curiosity. I wanted to see what the man I married had considered worth saving. I slit the tape with a pair of scissors and opened the lid. It was filled with the usual keepsakes. Old concert ticket stubs from our first dates. A dried flower from a bouquet he'd given me. A silly photo booth strip of us making faces. It was all so painfully normal. So heartbreakingly fake. It was a box of props from the stage play of our marriage. My hand brushed against something hard and small at the bottom of the box. I pulled it out. It was a slim, black USB flash drive. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't the one he used for work. That one was silver and clipped to his cane. This was something else. Something hidden. My heart began to beat a little faster. This was part of his private world. A world he had clearly kept separate from me. I should have thrown it away. I should have snapped it in half and buried it at the bottom of the trash. But I couldn't. It felt like a key. A key to what? I didn't know. But after weeks of feeling utterly powerless, the possibility of knowledge, of understanding, was a drug I couldn't resist. I waited until Chloe was at work the next day. Arya was napping in her bassinet, her little chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. The apartment was quiet. I took the flash drive and Chloe's laptop and sat at her small kitchen table. My hands were shaking as I slid the drive into the USB port. A window popped up on the screen, showing the drive's contents. It was a single, password-protected folder. Of course it was. My mind raced, sifting through the debris of our shared life. Anniversaries, birthdays, pet names. I tried them all. Elian Mark, 5,122,020. Vance 01. Nothing. Access denied. I leaned back, frustrated. I was about to give up when a distant memory surfaced. We were on a road trip. Years ago, driving through the mountains. We passed a field where a beautiful golden retriever was chasing a frisbee. Mark had pointed at it. If we ever get a dog, he'd said, "That's what I want. We'll name him Ranger." We never got the dog. The timing was never right. It was another one of his empty, beautiful promises. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It was a long shot. But this drive was from his secret life? Maybe the password was from a secret dream. I typed it in. RNGR2-3. I hit enter. The folder opened. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't filled with pictures or personal files. It was a meticulously organized collection of spreadsheets, document files, and subfolders. The file names were cryptic. Henderson Project Roy, Oak Creek Development, Client Potentials. I clicked on the first spreadsheet. Columns of numbers swam before my eyes. Addresses, purchase prices, sale prices, and another column labeled consulting fee. The fees were enormous, sometimes as much as a profit from the sale itself, and they were all directed to a holding company I'd never heard of. S.R. Enterprises. S.R. Sophia Rinaldi. I clicked on another file. A Word document. It was a template. A script. It was a detailed set of instructions on how to identify vulnerable clients, the elderly, recent divorcees, people in financial distress. It outlined how to gain their trust, how to leverage their desperation, how to obscure fees and inflate costs. It was a predator's playbook. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just sharp business practice. This was systematic, predatory fraud. Then I found the folder labeled Vance Property. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were emails, hundreds of them, exchanged between Mark and Sophia over the past year. I started reading, and the floor fell away from beneath me. They weren't love letters. They were business communications, cold and clinical. They discussed me as if I were a problem to be managed. "Sophia, she's getting suspicious about the late-night calls. Be more careful. Mark, don't worry. I've got her wrapped around my finger. She's too busy picking out cribs to notice anything. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. Sophia, the POA needs to be signed this week if we want to close on schedule. Did you bury it deep enough in the Refi docs? Mark, of course. She'll just see the lower interest rate and sign on the dotted line. Easiest mark I've ever had. Sophia, what about the timing? The baby's due soon. Mark, it's perfect. She'll be distracted. By the time she's out of the hospital and realizes what happened, you'll be moved in and it will be a done deal. She's emotional. She'll break down, not fight back. Easiest mark I've ever had. The words burned themselves onto my brain. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had profiled me. He had analyzed my weakness, my trust, my love, my pregnancy, and exploited them with surgical precision. I wasn't his wife. I was a target. Arya wasn't our daughter. She was a distraction. The final file I opened was a simple list. It was a list of names. Dozens of them. Beside each name was a property address and a numbered amount of money mark, and Sophia had swindled from them. These were his other victims, the people he had destroyed before he got to me. I was just the latest name on his list, the one he had betrayed most intimately. I closed the laptop. The quiet of the apartment was deafening. The ghost that had been inhabiting my body for the past month was gone. The grief, the sadness, the hollowed-out despair, it was all burned away in a white-hot flash of pure, undiluted rage. He thought I was emotional. He thought I would break down. He thought I wouldn't fight back. He had profiled me. Yes, but he had made one critical, catastrophic miscalculation. He had mistaken my love for weakness. He had mistaken my trust for stupidity. He thought he had buried me. But he had only planted a seed. I stood up and walked to the bassinet, looking down at my sleeping daughter. Her face was so peaceful. So innocent. He had tried to use her as a tool in his sick game. He had tried to build his new life on the ruins of ours. A cold, calm clarity settled over me. This was no longer about a house. I would never get that back. And I no longer wanted it. It was tainted. A crime scene. This was no longer about a broken heart. Hearts can mend. This was about justice. This was about retribution. He had built an empire of lies. One stolen dream at a time. And I, the architect, was going to draw up the blueprints for its demolition. He didn't just take my home. He took my future. And for that, I would take everything from him. The rage didn't burn out. It cooled, hardening into something solid and sharp, like obsidian. When Chloe came home that evening, she didn't find me crying on the sofa. She found me at her kitchen table, her laptop open, my face illuminated by the glow of the screen. Arya was in a baby carrier strapped to my chest, sleeping soundly against the steady, rhythmic beat of my newly purposeful heart. Chloe said, her voice cautious as she set her briefcase down. You're up. I am. I said, my voice even and cold. I didn't look away from the screen. You need to see this. For the next hour, I walked her through everything. The hidden flash drive, the password, the spreadsheets detailing his fraudulent consulting fees, the predatory playbook he used to target his victims, the emails with Sophia, the ones that laid their entire conspiracy bare. I showed her the list of names. Chloe stood behind me, one hand on my shoulder, her initial shock melting into a familiar, professional fury. The comforting friend vanished, and the sharp-witted attorney took her place. Her eyes scanned the documents, her mind processing the legal implications, the sheer scale of the criminality. When I was finished, she was silent for a long moment. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights, her back to me. This is more than just a nasty divorce. She said finally, her voice tight. This is conspiracy to defraud. It's racketeering. It's a felony. Many felonies. She turned to face me, her eyes blazing. We can destroy him with this. We can hand this drive over to the district attorney, and they will bury him under a prison. A year ago, that would have been my answer. Let the system handle it. But the system had failed me. A legal document, my own signature, had been used to make me homeless. My faith in the system was gone. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. That's not enough. Chloe frowned. What do you mean? Not enough? He'll go to jail for years. He'll go to jail. And Sophia will probably cut a deal and get probation. I countered, the plan already beginning to form in my mind. His assets will be frozen and tied up in legal battles for a decade. The victims might see pennies on the dollar, if they're lucky. And I said, gesturing between myself and the sleeping baby on my chest, we'll get nothing. He'll be a criminal, but he'll be a martyr in his own mind. A victim of a system that caught him. That's not justice. So what is? She asked, walking back to the table, her gaze intense. Justice, I said, looking her straight in the eye, is him losing everything, not just his freedom, his reputation, his money, the respect of his peers. I want him to be ruined, publicly and completely. I don't want the state to take him down. I want him to know that I did it. Chloe stared at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. The friend was back, but she was different now. She wasn't here to comfort me. She was here to conspire. Okay, she said, pulling up a chair. I'm in. So what's the plan? Architect? The list of names on the flash drive became our Bible. We spent the next 2 days researching each one, cross-referencing them with public records. Many were elderly. Their homes now owned by shell corporations. Some had moved away, disappeared, likely too ashamed or broken to fight. But one name stood out, David Chen. According to the property records, he had lost a commercial building in the downtown historic district, a property that had been in his family for generations. And he still lived in Northwood. He's our best shot, I said, pointing to his name. He was one of Mark's biggest marks. And he's local. He has roots here. It's a risk, Chloe warned. He might be too scared to get involved. He might even call Mark and warn him. It's a risk we have to take. I insisted. We can't do this alone. We need another voice. Someone whose life he ruined. Chloe found a phone number for him. I was the one who made the call. I rehearsed what I would say. But when a tired, weary voice answered, the script flew out of my head. Mr. Chen, I said, my heart pounding. My name is Alara Vance. You don't know me. But my husband was Mark Vance. And I believe he did the same thing to you that he did to me. There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then, a long, weary sigh. I have nothing to say about that man, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He was about to hang up. He stole my home while I was in the hospital giving birth to his daughter, I said, the words rushing out of me. He left us with nothing. I have proof. Mr. Chen, I know how he did it. I know about the holding companies, the inflated fees. I know everything. Please, just meet with me. 10 minutes. That's all I ask. Another pause. I could hear him breathing. Where? He asked finally. We met the next day at a small, anonymous coffee shop halfway between the city and the suburbs. He was an older man, maybe in his late 60s, with kind eyes clouded by a deep sadness. He carried himself like a man who had been defeated. His shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the ground. He ordered a black coffee and didn't touch it. I started talking. I didn't show him the flash drive at first. I just told him my story. I told him about the house I designed, about the power of attorney buried in the paperwork, about the moment Sophia opened my front door. As I spoke, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He had lived a version of the story, too. He told me it was a partnership, David said, his voice barely a whisper. He stared into his untouched coffee cup. My building was old. It needed repairs I couldn't afford. He came to me with a proposal. He would invest his company's money to renovate and bring it up to code, and we would split the profits from the new leases. He was so charming, so convincing. He said he wanted to preserve the historic character of the neighborhood. He finally looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I signed the papers. He buried me in them. My English is not so good. I thought I was signing a partnership agreement. Instead, I was signing away my deed. I gave him the building my father left me for a $10,000 renovation fee that he invented. By the time my son, the lawyer, saw the papers, it was too late. He owned it. He flipped it a month later for $1 million profit and I saw nothing. I am so sorry, I whispered, my own loss feeling suddenly smaller in the face of his. I lost more than a building, he said, his voice thick with shame. I lost my family's legacy. My son. He looks at me differently now. Like I was a fool. You weren't a fool, I said, my voice fierce. You were targeted. So was I. I reached into my bag and pulled out Chloe's laptop. I turned it around and showed him the flash drive. Mark was meticulous. He kept records of everything. I opened the folder with his name on it and showed him the emails, the doctored invoices, the internal spreadsheet that detailed the exact profit Mark and Sophia had made from his property. He stared at the screen, his face turning pale. Seeing the cold, hard proof of their conspiracy seemed to drain the last bit of fight out of him. What's the point? He said, shaking his head. It is over. They won. No, I said, leaning forward, my voice intense. They haven't won yet. They think we're broken. They think we'll just fade away. Mark's entire empire is built on a foundation of lies. But he's become arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. But I know something about foundations, Mr. Chen, and I know how to find the cracks. I looked down at Arya, who was sleeping in my lap. He thinks he took everything from me, I said, my voice softening. But he left me with the one thing I have to fight for. What I want is not just to get him arrested. I want to expose him so thoroughly that no one will ever trust him again. I want to take back the one thing he can't stand to lose, his reputation. But I need your help. I need a face for his crimes. Someone respected in the community who can stand up and say, this is what he did to me. David looked from the laptop screen to my face, and then down to my daughter. He watched her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he reached out a trembling hand and gently touched the top of her head. My granddaughter is her age, he said softly. He drew his hand back and took a deep breath, his slumped shoulders straightening just a little. Okay, Ms. Vance, he said, meeting my eyes with a newfound resolve. What do you need me to do? The alliance was forged, with Chloe handling the legal strategy and David providing a crucial link to Mark's past dealings. I could finally focus on my part of the plan. My role was unique. I was going to use my own expertise, the very talent Mark had claimed to admire, as a weapon. Chloe's apartment was transformed into our war room. We bought a huge whiteboard, and I began to map out Mark's entire real estate empire. Every property he and Sophia had developed and sold in the last 5 years. David helped us get documents from his old files, and Chloe used her legal access to pull public permits and blueprints. I spread the blueprints for his flagship projects across Chloe's living room floor. These were buildings I had once admired. Now, I looked at them with a predator's eye. I wasn't looking at the elegant lines or the innovative use of space. I was looking for the shortcuts, the cheats, the code violations. As an architect, I know the language of construction. I know that behind every beautiful facade, there's a skeleton of steel, concrete, and regulations. And I knew that a man like Mark, so focused on profit, would have cut corners. And I found them. Everywhere. I found evidence of him using cheaper, non-fire-rated drywall in a condo building, saving millions but putting dozens of families at risk. I found structural reports on a commercial building that had been clearly forged to ignore a foundational issue. I found permits that had been pushed through with suspicious speed, suggesting city inspectors had been bribed. Each violation was a crack in his foundation. I highlighted them in red, the plan slowly bleeding with his crimes. I worked tirelessly, often late into the night, with Arya sleeping in a sling against my chest. The complex work, the intense focus, it was healing. The grief that had paralyzed me was being channeled into productive, focused rage. I was no longer a victim. I was a hunter, and I was meticulously building a trap. Mark and Sophia were planning their biggest launch yet, a luxury high-rise they'd named the Pinnacle. It was set to be the crown jewel of their careers, and I was going to make sure it was the tombstone for their empire. The invitation arrived at Chloe's apartment in a thick, cream-colored envelope, embossed with a sleek, silver logo, a stylized P for the Pinnacle. It was addressed to me, forwarded from my old address. A cruel, final taunt. Inside, the card invited the city's elite to the grand unveiling gala for Northwood's most anticipated luxury high-rise. It was the culmination of everything Mark and Sophia had stolen, a monument to their greed built on the foundations of broken lives. It was to be their coronation, and I was going to make sure it was their execution. For the next 2 weeks, our war room was a hive of activity. My part, the architectural forensics, was done. Now it was about logistics. Chloe, using her legal expertise, packaged the evidence into a clear, damning narrative. David, using his connections in the old business community, quietly reached out to some of the other names on our list. He didn't ask them to join a lawsuit. He simply asked them to attend a party. My most important preparation had nothing to do with evidence. It was about finding myself again. I used a small portion of my dwindling savings to buy a dress. It wasn't extravagant, but it was elegant and strong, a deep midnight blue that felt like armor. I had my hair cut and styled. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw the hollow-eyed ghost from the first few weeks. I saw a woman, a mother, a survivor. I was ready. The night of the gala was clear and cold. The Pinnacle Tower scraped the night sky, a glittering spear of glass and steel. Valets in crisp uniforms hurried to open the doors of expensive cars, and a river of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos flowed into the building. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth, with a towering ceiling, marble floors, and a massive, abstract sculpture. Champagne flowed from fountains, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. Mark and Sophia stood near the entrance, greeting their guests. They were the king and queen of the evening. Mark looked radiant in a custom tuxedo, his smile dazzling, his hand confidently on the small of Sophia's bag. She was breathtaking in a blood-red dress, diamonds dripping from her ears and throat. They looked powerful, untouchable, and utterly pleased with themselves. I didn't go in the front door. A friend of Chloe's, a tech specialist who owed her a favor, had arrived earlier posing as part of the AV crew. He had a gift for me, a USB drive containing our presentation, and a back door into the event's projection system, now controlled by a simple app on my phone. My ticket wasn't the invitation in my purse. It was the phone in my hand. David and the 5 other victims we've managed to contact were already inside, scattered throughout the crowd. They were instructed to simply blend in, to enjoy the free drinks, until their moment came. Chloe was my ride, my support, waiting in the car a block away. I was on my own. I entered through a side service door. My heart a cold, steady drum in my chest. Arya was safe with a trusted babysitter. Chloe's recommendation. This was a night for monsters, not for angels. I found a quiet spot in the shadows of a large potted plant on the mezzanine level. A perfect vantage point overlooking the entire lobby. I could see them, but they couldn't see me. I watched Mark laugh, shake hands, and accept congratulations. He was a master of his craft, selling the fantasy of himself as much as the fantasy of his buildings. After an hour of schmoozing, a hush fell over the crowd as Mark and Sophia took the stage. A massive screen, 20 feet high, descended behind them, displaying the shimmering logo of the pinnacle. Sophia spoke first, her voice smooth and practiced, thanking their investors and the city for their support. Then she turned the microphone over to Mark. He beamed, soaking in the applause. "Thank you," he began, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate not just a building, but a new vision for Northwood. When we started this project, we had one goal in mind, to build more than just luxury condos. We wanted to build a community, a place founded on trust, on quality, and on the promise of a better future." The hypocrisy was so thick I could have choked on it. Trust. He dared to use that word. He continued his speech, filled with empty platitudes about hard work and integrity. He was a true artist, painting a masterpiece of lies. I watched the faces in the crowd. They were captivated, hanging on his every word. They saw a visionary, a pillar of the community. They had no idea who he really was, but they were about to find out. "This building, the pinnacle," he said, his voice swelling with manufactured emotion as he reached his crescendo, "is a testament to what we can achieve when we build on a solid foundation. It is a symbol of our commitment to you, our partners, our clients, our city. It is our legacy." That was my cue. Solid foundation. From the shadows of the mezzanine, I opened the app on my phone. My finger hovered over a single, red button on the screen that read Execute. I took a deep breath and pressed it. On the massive screen behind Mark, the glittering pinnacle logo glitched. It flickered, distorted, and then vanished, replaced by the stark, black and white text of an email. "Mark, don't worry. I've got her wrapped around my finger. She's too busy picking out cribs to notice anything. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Mark, blinded by the stage lights, hadn't seen it yet. He faltered for a second, his rhythm broken by the crowd's reaction. But he tried to press on. A legacy of trust, and the screen changed again. Another email. "Sophia, the POA needs to be signed this week. Did you bury it deep enough in the Refi docs?" Now the murmurs grew louder. People were pointing at the screen. Mark finally turned, his confident smile freezing on his face as he read the words. The color drained from his cheeks. Sophia, standing beside him, looked as if she'd been turned to stone. The screen shifted to the spreadsheet, to the columns of inflated consulting fees, to the name S.R. Enterprises, then to the predatory playbook, its cynical instructions scrolling slowly for all to see. Mark grabbed the microphone, his hand trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be having some technical difficulties," he stammered. "There are no technical difficulties, Mr. Vance." The voice came from the crowd. It was David Chen. He walked calmly toward the stage, his posture no longer slumped and defeated, but tall and proud. The crowd parted for him. He didn't need a microphone. His quiet dignity commanded the room's attention. "My name is David Chen," he said, his voice clear and strong as he stopped at the foot of the stage. "And what you see on that screen is not a glitch. It is the truth. Mark Vance came to me and promised me a partnership. He promised to save my family's building. Instead, he used deceptive documents to steal it from me, leaving me with nothing but shame." As he spoke, another man stood up from a different part of the room. An elderly man in a simple suit, then a woman in her 50s, her face etched with a quiet anger, then timor. They didn't say a word. They just stood, silent witnesses, their presence a powerful, damning chorus. The lobby was in chaos. The self-important chatter had been replaced by shocked gasps and frantic whispers. Investors were staring at Mark, their faces masks of fury and disbelief. The press, who had been there to cover a real estate launch, were now scrambling, sensing a much bigger story. Mark and Sophia were trapped on the stage, exposed under the harsh lights, their kingdom crumbling around them. Sophia was furiously whispering in Mark's ear, but he looked catatonic, his eyes wide with horror as he stared at the cascading evidence of his crimes on the screen behind him. Now, it was my turn. I walked out from the shadows of the mezzanine and descended the grand staircase. The crowd, noticing the new movement, fell silent. Every eye in the room turned to me. I walked with a slow, deliberate pace, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I didn't look at the shocked faces of the guests. I didn't look at Sophia. I looked only at Mark. I stopped at the bottom of the stage, just a few feet from David. I was holding nothing but my phone. I didn't need to. My presence was enough. Mark's eyes finally found mine. In them, I saw it all. Confusion. Then recognition. Then utter, soul-shattering disbelief. He looked at me as if he were seeing a ghost. The ghost of the easy Mark who was supposed to break down, not fight back. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment longer. I let him see me, strong and whole. I let him see the architect of his ruin. Then, I raised my voice, not shouting, but ensuring it was clear enough for everyone to hear. You took our home, I said, my voice steady and cold. So I took your kingdom. As if on cue, the grand glass doors of the lobby swung open. But it wasn't a late arriving guest. It was two uniformed police officers, followed by a pair of detectives in plain clothes. The flashing red and blue lights of their patrol cars pulsed through the lobby, washing the panicked faces of the crowd in an infernal glow. They walked directly toward the stage. It was over. The world exploded in a supernova of flashing lights. For a moment, the lobby of the Pinnacle was a chaotic ballet of panic and disbelief, frozen in the strobe-like bursts of a dozen press cameras. The whispers that had rippled through the crowd moments before had become a roaring wave of sound. Mark and Sophia stood on the stage, bathed in the flashing red and blue lights of the police cars, to statues in a wax museum of their own ruin. I saw Mark's eyes lock on the approaching detectives, and the last vestiges of his composure shattered. The charming real estate magnate, the visionary, the king of Northwood was gone. In his place was a cornered, terrified man. Sophia was a different story. Her shock had already hardened into a mask of cold fury. She shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, a silent promise of a war that was far from over. But I was already done. My part was finished. As the detectives began to calmly ascend the steps to the stage, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Chloe. I hadn't even seen her enter. It's time to go, she said, her voice low and urgent. Our work here is done. Let the scavengers pick the bones. She was right. My goal was never to watch them be led away in handcuffs. My goal was to take down itself public. Undeniable annihilation of their reputation. Anything more would be gloating. And I was too tired for that. Chloe guided me through the stunned crowd, which parted for us as if I were a ghost. I didn't look at anyone. I kept my eyes fixed on the exit. We slipped out a side door just as the first reporters began to notice my departure and scramble in our direction. The night air was cold and clean against my hot face. We got into Chloe's car and she pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights and the imploding party behind us. I looked in the rearview mirror, watching the magnificent glass tower recede into the distance. It was a beautiful building. A beautiful lie. The car was quiet for several long blocks. The adrenaline that had been a roaring fire in my veins for weeks was finally beginning to die down, leaving cold ashes and a profound sense of emptiness in its wake. I had won. I had done the impossible. I had destroyed the man who destroyed me. So why didn't I feel victorious? Are you okay? Chloe asked softly, glancing over at me. I don't know what I am. I answered honestly. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. I just feel empty. That's the adrenaline crash, she said, her voice full of understanding. You've been in fight or flight mode for 2 months. You're not built to come down from that in an instant. It's okay to not feel okay. You just tore down a mountain with your bare hands. It's bound to leave you tired. When we got back to her apartment, the babysitter was reading on the sofa, and the only sound was the soft hum of the baby monitor. Arya was sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware of the earthquake her mother had just triggered. After I paid the sitter, I went to the bassinet and just stood there, watching my daughter breathe. Her tiny, perfect chest rose and fell. She was real. She was my solid ground in a world that had turned to quicksand. The rage that had fueled me was gone. And in its place, this fierce, quiet love began to seep back in, filling the cracks. The next morning, The story was everywhere. It was the lead on every local news channel. The front page of the Northwood Chronicle. They were calling it the pinnacle scandal. My face was plastered next to Mark's and Sophia's. The media, deprived of an interview with me, had crafted their own narrative. To some, I was a hero, a champion for the underdog. To others, I was a vengeful ex-wife, a woman scorned. They all got it wrong. I wasn't a hero or a villain. I was just a mother who had been pushed too far. Chloe fielded the calls, a ferocious bulldog guarding my privacy. No comment, she repeated, over and over, to reporters from local papers and national news outlets alike. Ms. Vance will not be making a statement at this time. I was grateful for the silence. I had told my story on that screen. I had nothing more to say. A few days later, we were called into a meeting with the district attorney's office. The DA, a sharp woman named Eleanor Schmidt, greeted us not with suspicion but with something that looked a lot like awe. Ms. Vance, she said, shaking my hand firmly. I've been a prosecutor for 20 years, and I have never, ever been handed a case this beautifully packaged. The evidence on that drive is a prosecutor's dream. It's clean. It's organized. It's devastating. You didn't just give us a case against Vance and Rinaldi. You gave us a conviction. We sat with her and her team for hours, walking them through the files. I explained the architectural fraud, the code violations I had uncovered. David Chen, who had come with us, gave a calm, dignified statement about his own experience, his voice no longer trembling with shame but steady with resolve. The DA's team took meticulous notes, their excitement palpable. With the public nature of your reveal, Schmidt explained, and the testimony of Mr. Chen and the other victims you gathered, Vance and Rinaldi were denied bail. They're a massive flight risk. Their assets have been frozen. Their careers are over, regardless of the trial's outcome. It was good news. It was everything I had wanted. But it all felt strangely distant, like it was happening to someone else. The legal process would now grind on for months, maybe years. There would be depositions, hearings, a trial. But my part in it was over. The war was won. Now I was left on a quiet battlefield, surrounded by the wreckage, and I had to figure out how to build a life out of it. That night, the emptiness returned, heavier than before. Arya was fussy, struggling with a bit of colic. I walked the floor of Chloe's small living room with her, patting her back, humming a tuneless lullaby. The city lights twinkled outside the window. Across town, the man I had once promised to love forever was sitting in a jail cell because of me. The house I had poured my soul into was a crime scene, sealed with legal tape. Victory felt a lot like loss. Tears I didn't know I had left began to stream down my face, silent and hot. I wasn't crying for Mark. I was crying for the woman I had been, naive, trusting woman who believed in forever. I was crying for the life Arya was supposed to have, the one with a father who loved her and a home that was safe. Destroying Mark hadn't brought any of that back. It hadn't healed the wound of his betrayal. It hadn't erased the memory of Sophia's smug smile in my doorway. The revenge had been a necessary, cleansing fire, but it had burned away everything, leaving the ground barren. Arya finally quieted, her small body relaxing against my shoulder. I looked down at her, her face peaceful in sleep, her tiny hand clutching a fistful of my shirt, and a new, terrifying, and yet liberating thought took root in my mind. My life was no longer about him. It couldn't be. I had spent months consumed by his memory, his crimes, the need to see him punished. My entire existence had been a reaction to him. But he was gone now, a ghost in a system I no longer controlled. My life had to be about her, and it had to be about me. Not Alara Vance, the victim. Not Alara Vance, the avenger. Just Alara, an architect, a mother, a woman who had to build a new foundation, from scratch, on broken ground. The next day, I opened one of the boxes that had been sitting in the corner since they'd arrived. It was the box with my old sketchbooks and drawing pencils. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked up a pencil. It felt foreign in my hand. I hadn't designed anything in months. I had only been focused on demolition. I opened to a blank page. For a long time, I just stared at it. The white expanse was intimidating. It was a future I hadn't planned for. But as Arya cooed in her bassinet beside me, an idea began to form. Not a grand design. Not a masterpiece. Just a small shape. A line. A window to let in the morning light. I started to draw. It wasn't for a client. It wasn't for a portfolio. It was for me. I was drawing a house. Not the house I had lost, but a new one. Smaller. Simpler. A cottage. Maybe. A place with a garden for Arya to play in. A place built not on a foundation of lies, but on a foundation of resilience. It was just a sketch. Just a ghost of an idea. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt the faintest glimmer of hope. I wasn't just an architect of ruin. I could still be an architect of dreams. They would just have to be new dreams. The months that followed were a strange purgatory. The world moved on. But my life was tethered to the slow, grinding wheels of the justice system. The legal proceedings against Mark and Sophia became a full-blown media circus. Chloe, true to her word, shielded me from the worst of it. But their faces were unavoidably in the news, on the front of magazines and the grocery checkout line. They looked haggard, stripped of their power and glamour, reduced to defendants in ill-fitting suits. My testimony was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. When the day came, I walked into the courtroom feeling not vengeful or afraid, but strangely calm. I sat in the witness box. The polish would cool beneath my hands. I didn't look at the jury or the gallery. I looked directly at Mark. He sat at the defendant's table, a ghost of the man I had married. His tailored suits were gone, replaced by a cheap, off-the-rack version that hung limply on his frame. His confident smile was gone, replaced by a permanent, sullen scowl. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at his hands. I cowered to the very end. The prosecutor led me through my story. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told the truth. My voice even and clear. I spoke of the house I designed, the love I thought we had, the trust I had placed in him. I explained the power of attorney, the moment on the porch, the discovery of the flash drive. I wasn't a wife scorned. I was a witness to a crime, presenting the facts as I knew them. My calmness seemed to unnerve him more than any outburst could have. It was the ultimate proof that he no longer had any power over me. David Chen testified after me, his voice filled with a quiet dignity that captivated the courtroom. Other victims followed. The weight of their combined stories, of so many lives systematically dismantled for profit, was crushing. The jury was out for less than 4 hours. The verdict was guilty. On all counts. Conspiracy. Fraud. Racketeering. As the foreman read the decision, Sophia closed her eyes and her shoulders slumped in defeat. Mark just stared blankly ahead, as if he couldn't comprehend that his charm had finally failed him. They were sentenced a month later. Mark received 15 years in federal prison. Sophia, for her role as a co-conspirator, received 10. Their empire was gone. Their freedom was gone. The chapter was, finally and truly, closed. In the wake of the trial, a class action lawsuit, organized by Chloe on behalf of all the victims, resulted in a significant settlement. The assets that had been frozen, including the proceeds from the Pinnacle project, which had been abandoned by its investors and seized by the banks, were liquidated and distributed among the people Mark and Sophia had defrauded. One afternoon, Chloe came to her apartment, which I still called home, waving a certified check in her hand. It was my portion of the settlement. It was a substantial amount of money. Enough to start over. Enough to build something new. "There's one more thing," she said, her expression unreadable. "The house. Your old house. It's part of the asset liquidation. It's going up for a police auction next week." My heart skipped a beat. The house. My masterpiece. My crime scene. "You could buy it back. You know," Chloe said gently. "You have more than enough money now. You could get it back. You could go home." For a fleeting second, the image of it pulled at me. The sunlight in the nursery. The feel of the cool quartz countertops. The view of the pines from the bedroom window. But the memories were tainted now. I pictured Sophia's smug face in the doorway, the echo of the deadbolt locking me out. I pictured Mark's lies, whispered in rooms I had designed to be filled with love. It wasn't a home. It was a mausoleum. A beautiful tomb for a dead life. Going back wouldn't be a victory. It would be an imprisonment, trapping me forever in the past. "No," I said, the answer coming to me with absolute certainty. "That's not my home anymore. Let it go. Let someone else have it. My home is somewhere else." Chloe smiled, a wide, relieved grin. "I was hoping you'd say that." And so I began to build. I didn't build with anger or with spite. I built with hope. I took the settlement money and bought a small, overlooked piece of land on the coast, an hour's drive from the city. It was on a bluff overlooking the ocean. A windswept, beautiful place that smelled of salt and wild roses. I spent the next year of my life designing and overseeing the construction of my new house. It was the complete opposite of my old one, where that house had been grand and impressive. A statement piece designed to be admired. This one was small and humble, designed to be lived in. It was a simple, modern cottage, made of warm cedar and glass. It had no cavernous entryways or formal dining rooms. It had a cozy kitchen that opened into a single living space, a small bedroom for me, and an even smaller one for Arya. Every window was positioned to face the sea, to let in the boundless light of the sunrise and the soft glow of the sunset. I used honest materials: Shreklet wood, local stone, polished concrete. Nothing was fake. Nothing was pretending to be something it wasn't. It was a house with integrity. It was a house designed to heal. 1 year to the day after the Pinnacle Gala, we moved in. There were no moving trucks, just my car, packed with our few belongings. I carried Arya, now a curious toddler with a wobbly walk and her father's blue eyes, across the threshold. I felt no ghosts here, only possibility. The final scene of my old life was one of darkness and betrayal. The final scene of this new life is one of light. It is late afternoon. The sun is a fiery orange ball sinking into the Pacific, and its warm light floods our little living room. Arya, clutching the edge of the coffee table for support, takes a hesitant step, then another. She lets go, her face a perfect portrait of concentration. She takes 1, 2, 3 wobbly steps into the center of the room before tumbling softly onto the plush rug. She looks up at me, her mouth breaking into a wide, gummy smile, so proud of her own journey. I scoop her into my arms, burying my face in her soft, clean hair. She smells of sunshine and the sea. Through the large glass window, I can see the waves crashing on the shore below. The sound is a steady, soothing rhythm, a heartbeat for our new world. I lost a house, a magnificent structure built on a foundation of lies. But I have found a home. I've learned that home is not a place you are given. It's a place you build. It's not about the square footage or the designer finishes. It's about the safety you create, the light you let in. It's the feeling of my daughter's small, warm body in my arms. It's the knowledge that I am strong enough to be both her foundation and her roof. Mark took my past. He tried to take my future. But in the end, he only succeeded in showing me what I was truly capable of building on my own. And this life, this small, beautiful, honest life, is a masterpiece he can never touch.